Okay, ready for it. Yeah, it's saying it's going well. Done. Excellent. Okay. Okay. Hello, everybody. Let's get started. I'm Sudha Jamthe, and this is Weekly Wednesday on Business School of AI. Usually, this is hosted by Yashashwini Vishwanath, Yash, and today she's graciously allowed me to do a webinar, and the topic is Research 101. So thank you everybody for joining me. And I see some new faces. Maybe they are my more recent upcoming Stanford class students. So welcome Ida, Pat, Bang, Susanna, Andy. And I have my intern, Paria, right here. I will introduce her in a little bit. And let's get started. Okay, so I have a deck here. Let me go back. I'm going to have my fancy glasses with light reflecting on it. So bear with me. Okay. Let me share my screen. And we are going to be recording this. And if you don't want to be in the recording, obviously you can mute yourself and listen in. You can go off camera as many of you are doing. I will not call on specifically anybody. So if you have any questions, you can answer in the chat. I'll try to keep it as interactive as possible, but I want to cover a lot of content because this is a webinar on Research 101. So for those of you who are joining new, welcome. We are going to be recording this. This is actually streaming live onto YouTube where this recording will sit. So you can come back, watch it. But we will also be sharing the recording back in the Jamthe newsletter. Okay. And I want to ask you, how many of you here, and you can answer your questions right on the chat. And if you feel comfortable, I find that you get best value out of interacting with everybody else in here. So if you feel comfortable, then introduce yourself, at least say where you're joining us from. So I'm Sudha Jamthe. I'm a technology futurist, and I'm joining you from Silicon Valley. And usually we have my student alums come together, but we also have some new faces here. And welcome. Okay, so how many of you here have you published any research work, a research paper or a research work that you've done in a conference? Okay. Thank you for that. So, okay, we have Susanna here, cognitive scientist and AI ethical researcher. Yeah, Ida has done it a while back. Okay, so the purpose of my session here is manifold, but specifically AI research is something that is done by people who are either PhD researchers or researchers in some form who do that as part of their career. And so I want to let you know that this is something that anybody can do, and you don't have to take my word for it. That's why we're here. I'm just going to tell you why research in the first place. And then specifically today, I mean, I introduced myself as a technology futurist. I didn't introduce myself as an AI researcher, and I published some papers. But I find today, when I project out into the future of where AI industry is going, research is a very, very important component, which is today focused by academic researchers. And we want people like you and me in it. And that is why, and it's approachable, but it is also much needed to make AI more ethical, inclusive, to make it work for all of us. So that is my motivation to talk to you about AI research, demystify what I know in the space, and help you figure out whether this is something that you want to pursue. And so we can, go do some fun things together. Okay. Thank you also, Susanna. I think I have your paper as a reference today, one of your papers. Okay, so let me share my screen. You see, if I do present and record, I should be able to present, right? One second, guys. Okay. Are you able to see my screen now that I'm presenting? Just the screen? Yes. I'll bring the chat window back. Yes. Yes. Thank you for confirming that. Okay. So welcome everybody. We are here. It's going fast. Here we are at Weekly Wednesday, ready to talk about Research 101. And I say Research 101, but I'm going to be talking about AI research. Okay. Already introduced myself. Yash has put together this fancy intro. So thank you, Yash, for that. Okay. So at a high level, when you think about why AI research is obviously you can enhance your career, add diversity to AI. We can talk about that in a little bit. But what I found from my own experiences, I have published lots and lots of articles, hundreds of articles, and I have done many, many talks, and I put all my content out. So many of you know that I have this compulsive need to share and connect with others and drive discussions on my research topics. And I've written 6 books. But recently I realized that when I published that as a research paper, I have the opportunity of many people getting involved.
I am your host, Astro Robot.
So the first thing is, so the way I've set it up is I'm going to give you the why of research. And as part of it, I'm going to share some interesting paper research work, not just mine, ones I found interesting. So as you heard, here is Astro Robot, which is a robot from Amazon, which is a robot dog. And what's it going to do?
My job is to scan your home and track every human. I would like to keep you safe so you can shop a lot more on Amazon.
So when this was announced, it was fascinating to many because it's a robot, but it is also going to be intrusive and privacy evading in our homes. So this is one of those things which gets you thinking. So the second reason is you could get a conversation started on any topic. And you can see I'm here with my same glasses. And this is my student and AIX designer, Viola Maybach, and Dr. Charles Ika. And here is one of our paper, and we ended up presenting at a conference. And I have a framework called AIX, which is about designing artificial intelligence. And we wanted to expand that to say, hey, if Astro Robot is being built and there's tons of framework of what is AI ethics about privacy and trust and transparency and whatnot, should the AI as a personality actually have ethics baked into it? We started talking amongst ourselves about it. And then we said, hey, why don't we publish this? And so we ended up creating or expanding my existing framework to add a character tenet or a character as a background, and ended up publishing this. And what was my goal to publish this? It was to get conversation, to get into the right room with the people who are researchers or UX designers or people thinking about ML UX, which is machine learning UX or UX design in the AI space, and wanted to jumpstart a conversation saying, how are you going about this? How are you personalizing it? How are you genderizing? And what was done with Alexa, is that going to be done with Astro Robot, or is it going to be something different? So it's the beginning of a conversation. And the purpose of my research was to get us started in that. The third thing you could do, and now I'm going to share interesting research as I promised, as I'm giving you different reasons why you could get involved in research, is I'm going to share interesting research from other people, other researchers that I found very inspiring. So a third reason could be that you want to expand your perspective to the world. So I can't give you a better quote than this article called Building Bridges, a Eurocentric to an intercultural information ethics. Here are two professors from University of Delhi who decided, hey, how do we bring AI ethics? But it cannot be just a Eurocentric approach. If you look at the papers that are published in AI ethics, if you see a lot of AI papers, it is done from the northern part of the world. How do you include the global south? How do you include more Asia? And how do you not just the number of people from those places, but how do you bring that intercultural perspective? And so, in fact, we have IoT Day coming up, and I'm going to share a little bit more about IoT Day in the second half of my presentation today, where we will learn from 24 women in 24 hours, and they're going to be doing research readouts. So we are going to have Dr. Aisha Gautam and Deepa Singh, who you see on the screen. This is Dr. Aisha Gautam, and this is Deepa Singh, and they are going to be doing a research readout on this specific paper. But here, coming back to our topic on Research 101, we could drive a conversation, or we could expand to a world perspective on something that's already being discussed in our worlds, but to bring it to a larger audience. The fourth thing is, this is like a well-kept secret. Before I got into the research world, before I published as a researcher, I was not aware. There are so many grants and fellowships out there, and that is an opportunity that you can earn real money by doing your research. So what Charles and Viola and I came up with as the character development for AI ethics framework, we expanded on it. We said, okay, this is what we propose. So the good thing with research, what happens is, and we're going to talk about it, the semantics and the how of it. But once you start off with something, it's not going to sit in a box, right? So when I say, oh, AIX design should be brought to the UX design world and have a conversation how to make AI ethical, it's not going to be just, I thought about it, I wrote it, and I leave it there. Next step of it, logically, it made sense to prove that empirically. And so what we had proposed was more a theoretical approach. So we said, okay, we can prove that empirically using data and do some research out in the world with real AI. What does that look like? And we found that Notre Dame IBM had a tech ethics lab, and they had a call for proposals for funding, and we were lucky to receive that funding. So we are one of the maybe 10 or 12 grant receivers of this proposal program that happened just this beginning of this year. So we are working on it, saying, okay, now how do we empirically prove that? So coming back, you could just do research on a topic that you're passionate about, and you want to drive a discussion. You don't even want to get into the drive a discussion part, but you say, hey, there is fellowship grant. Maybe I can benefit from that. So that could be your motivation. Here is my friend, Dr. Tahera Sahib. She goes by Sonia. Professor Sonia from Iran actually has a superpower. She actually looks at patterns. So a lot of her research papers are bibliometric papers. And what it means is she would take a lot of papers that is out there and map it and look for patterns. And from that patterns, she will tell a story and try to push for change. So this is an example of one of her research. It is about mapping research strands of ethics of artificial intelligence in healthcare. So she took a bunch of, I think, 300 odd papers, and then did this bibliometric analysis, and then came up with that. So I'm going to pause there for a minute, because what I want to do is, I want to actually show you some of these. If I theoretically keep saying, yes, somebody did this and you could do that, that doesn't mean much to you, right? Does anybody have any question or comment for me? So I wanted to share some of these. Let me get that. Okay. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to share. This is Taibe Sahib, and here is her paper. And ResearchGate is a research community that I was introduced to by Susanna Raj. And researchers publish it, and the conversation. Remember, I said have a conversation. It doesn't have to be in a conference setting. It could be that you post your thinking as an initial paper, and you can find other researchers gravitate towards that. So here is the bibliometric content analysis that I was telling you from Dr. Sahib. So this is her paper. And so she basically, what she did is she took, there's a database called Scopus, which has research publications. She took that and she searched for certain keywords based on healthcare, right? She's looking for healthcare. So that was her data retrieval process. And then she found documents, and she found 585 documents. And then based on some reviews, she excluded 473 of them. And then she's basically, organized to see what the key patterns was. This was the word cloud that she produced. And she ended up with 383 papers. And then her whole research paper is taking that and looking for patterns and what are the areas that the papers are focused on. So her whole research was, she wanted to find out what are the topics of research on AI ethics in specifically healthcare space. Why would somebody want to do that? What is the use of that? When you think of research, you're always thinking, okay, why am I doing this? What is the purpose of this? Most people think that you come up with a hypothesis and you're saying this is not right, this needs to be done this way, and then they will run an experiment. So I've heard from people who said, oh, but I don't know to do that thing. I don't know the data analysis element, or I don't know to do the programming related to that. So I'm here to tell you, yes, you would need to do this with a statistical rigor. So it's not, it's not based, if it is not based on sound statistics, it could be challenged. And when you publish a paper, it is typically going to a peer-reviewed publication, which means there are people who are of similar caliber, who understand the field, who are going to be reviewing that and coming back and asking questions. And so that is important, but running the math on it or running an algorithm on it is not the main focus. In this case, Dr. Sahib wanted to see where are the gaps. She's always looking for these kind of bibliometric research so that she can say, oh, I see a gap in this topic. And then, in fact, I'm working on a new paper with her, and we arrived at this because she found a gap on a topic that was not covered elsewhere. So one of the things when I said you build on the work of others is you do a search and you find out who is doing what. And then the idea that you're thinking about, has somebody already done it? And do you agree to it? Do you have a different approach to it? Is that something you can build upon? And so that's how you go about it. So you can't just do a little Google search or go into a community of selection of set of researchers and just build on that. So you have to search the world, because there are researchers working on things everywhere, in every part of the world, in every industry, especially with AI. AI is so pervasive, so it might not be limited to your specific industry, right? So there might be people who are working on something that you don't know about them, and that's obviously, a beautiful reason to find amazing work from other people too. Okay, so I'm going to pause. Any questions, comments? Should I continue at the same pace? This is useful. Or you have questions? Talk to me. So I've told you about, I've been singing the praise of AI research so far, but in that exercise, hopefully you're seeing interesting work from other researchers. And this is just a handful, right? This is, you go based on your interest and you're going to find more. So I spoke about how you can present an idea and, you present at a conference, or you can get a conversation started because you want to drive some change, or you're passionate about a topic, or you're working on something, but you want to expand this to a broader audience, to a worldview, like I was talking to you about Professor Aisha and Deepa Singh's work. Or you can do this, as a career to go earn some grants. And the last thing we were talking about is, you are passionate about an area and you see a pattern and you want to share that with the world. Okay. And the obvious one that everybody is interested in, I'm coming back to sharing my screen, that particular deck again, is You want to enhance your career. And so most research work today is done by professional academicians who publish it. And there are people who are working, especially for AI research, who are working in tech industry, who want to come and share the research. So this, I'm going to show you, this is, let me show you the actual site for this back here. So this is from NVIDIA's GTC conference, and they had this call for posters. So a poster is a simple format where you say, here is what I'm proposing in my research, and this is the process I followed, and here's the results of my experiment, and why does this matter, right? And then, or you might have a little bit more specifics. It doesn't matter. The basic thing is what you give an introduction, share your hypothesis, show the experiments or how you're getting the results to prove your point, and where, and then lead to, okay, who else, what else needs to be done. And this is going to be work in progress. So remember, just because you propose a hypothesis doesn't mean that is right. So when you start getting data to prove it, that's where it gets very, very interesting, guys, because you might have an hypothesis and think very linearly, I need to prove this yes or right, I believe this is right, and let me prove this with data. And then you might find other interesting things. I'm going to show you one of my own paper and where it took us, and it'll be very fascinating to see that. But coming back, I was talking about how it enhances your career. So other than people who are in academic, in academia, who are working on PhDs and doing research, there's a whole movement of people in technology industry working on different, in Facebook or Google or a new startup out there, they and around the world, they are getting involved and say, hey, I'm going to go propose this and do a poster, because NVIDIA conference is giving me an opportunity, or they might publish this into a full paper. In fact, let me see, I was not planning to show this, but there is a site called Paper with Code. Let me find that for you. It's a whole community of people who are just looking at papers. Paper with Code. Let me put that in the chat. That's the name of the site. And so these are people, okay. This is called Papers with Code. So even now, if you're not in the research world, you're not yet working on any paper, you're saying, hey, I don't know if that is for me, you could just go here. So one of the things people feel very intimidated about research papers, because it proposes a hypothesis, it gives some kind of output, but it might not be something that you can rerun. So a whole bunch of developers come here, submit papers done by somebody else, and then they take the paper and they run some code to prove what the paper is showing and to show what results are they getting. And somebody might do that in Python, somebody might do that in Java. So if you're interested in that, you can see. But I find that just going over this site, looking at what the different papers are, and the conversation that is happening. So, and then this is like a whole community. So if you're interested in image classification, then or language modeling, so you can go by that and see what are the latest papers, who is doing what. And here I'm interested in autonomous vehicles, right? So then here it is talking about learning bird's eye view representation from multiple cameras for spatio-temporal transformers. So what does that mean? What does the spatio-temporal transformer mean? So then I could go look at this paper and then go look at how it does the 3D object detection from a self-driving car perception space. So this is one resource. And there are some other things. There is something called I think it's called 5 minutes paper in 5 minutes. I should check that on YouTube. There are some resources like that summarizing papers. But we are not here to just go look at papers for the sake of papers, right? So where I was telling you is you can enhance your career, because one thing is, I know many of my students who learn AI, and They want to move into that space. They want to establish credibility. They try to do projects. And you can go do only so much as an outsider. But here's the secret. With when you submit research, you get to collaborate with other people. Like I'm doing it with my students, or I'm doing it with my peers. And when you publish that, obviously it is a rigor, because you submit it, then it has to go through the peer review. It might not get accepted, and there is a method to the madness to get accepted. So you do that at a certain quality or an approach. I'll be talking to you about that. And then, you can actually, it's like, developers publish and put things on GitHub. So as a developer, when you go for an interview, they say, where's your GitHub? Like that, you could actually have your Google Scholar. So I publish my books, I publish my articles, and then my research papers, and then voila, if I go look at my Google Scholar, Google has already built out a link of all my work, and it's called citation, that other people are referencing back to that. It says who's referring back to my work. So it's beautiful. And so that is how you get to build on other people's work. And so let me go back. Let me show you one of the researchers that I admire. This is Professor Malka Halgamuge. She teaches at Lathrop University in Melbourne. And in fact, for on IoT Day, we are going to kick off with Professor Halgamuge's talk, because our plan for IoT Day is to run for 24 hours. So it'll be from 9 a.m. in Melbourne, which is 3 p.m. here in California, all the way till 3 p.m. on April 9th. And so April 8th, which is already April 9th in Melbourne, she will be doing a session about blockchain. But if you see her Google Scholar, it is actually showing, and she's an IoT person, and she talks about energy efficient clusters and whatnot, right? This is one of those papers that I found very useful, and I could understand what she's talking about. But the point I wanted to make, when here is one, you just do your work in your Google show, everything shows up in your Google Scholar, and you can see the citation of how many people have referenced back to your work. So you can see which of the papers were more interesting, or got a higher reach, and you can even follow other people's work in there. Okay. So coming back, we were talking about have a conversation, get some grant, and drive things, right? So is there anything else that why you should be doing research? It enhances your career, right? So let me go back to the share again. So we were at this, I was showing you the NVIDIA paper about enhancing career. So any of you, I would call all my students who are working in anywhere in the tech world who are interested, product management, if you're, many of your product managers, and many of you are business owners who have data. So to do research, you need data, and you have business knowledge of what is right and wrong. And so if you have an opinion on something, if you're passionate about an area, I think you should do research and talk to me. I'm happy to follow up if you're thinking on anything. And then obviously the big thing that we see is you can change the world. And this is Yash actually wearing the mask, but this was a research called Gender Shades by Joy Buolamwini and Timnit Kibru. And this created a whole revolution about facial recognition, how it is biased, so much so that the US Congress got a hearing, and top companies who were working on facial recognition with AI APIs that were not good enough to come out to the world yet because it was biased were stopped. And IBM, Microsoft, and Amazon were the three big tech players offering facial recognition software. Just from this Gender Shades paper, it created a whole movement, and all three of them are banned from publishing their APIs, and obviously they're working on it. IBM has dismantled that whole facial recognition unit. The other two are working to enhance it to get it better. So you could change things that doesn't work for you. And then the other thing that is interesting for me is, if you say it's not working for me, specifically if an AI is not working for me, that means it's not inclusive of me. Like that, it might not be inclusive of many other people. And so you could make AI inclusive. So my personal motivation when I'm saying, hey, let's do research, is obviously, as for my students, I want you to have an opportunity to go publish research, build on work of other people, get it to a global conversation, make yourself, bring your passion, share it. So, create visibility for your work, enhance your career, earn some grants, and make a name for yourself, make a mark on the world on topic that you're passionate about. But beyond that, I believe each of us have to do our part to make AI inclusive so that it works for us. It works for us with our lived truths, with our perspective and our angle of what we bring to make AI work. And I've said that in the AI development process, as we are learning to build AI, as we are thinking about the role of AI and business models with data and that powers the AI, that it has to be inclusive. That's the only way that it will earn trust and be continued to use by people. Here I'm making a statement. This could be something I could say, okay, if AI is not inclusive, does it earn the trust of people? And I could say, hey, this could be a research. And the first thing I would do is I would see whether somebody has already published this topic in some form. Is there some paper? And then, can I build on it? Do I agree to it? So one of the things I did is, given my focus on autonomous vehicles, I thought, okay, I'm talking about AI in the car. And all of you know that I do a lot of talks and many of my courses. Even in my AI class, one of the examples I give, the industry example, I bring it back to autonomous vehicles. And so I said, okay, there's AI in the vehicle. Is that inclusive? And I found that a lot of research which is talking about AI ethics was looking at how the car sees the road and whether that is inclusive. It is not. But they were not thinking about the AI inside the vehicle, because it's not marketed much. So I want to pause. And this is our paper. I did that with two of my students, with Yash and Suresh. And it's actually published. I've just said you for publication, but it is published now. So I want to pause. So for those of you who have been to my class or spoken and heard this before, what is AI in the car? Give me an example of AI in the car. Any AI in the car, what do you think? If you have taken my class or heard about it, it's great. If you've not, think about it. What is AI in the car? And then I can get to the inclusive part, and I'll tell you about the research. So my approach is I look at AI because I teach AI, and I look at AI in autonomous vehicles because that's an area of my work that I'm focused on, and say, okay, how do I make it inclusive? And then that opened up opportunities to publish research. Okay, so give me an example, guys. Just chat and say AI in the car, because I always keep talking about AI in the car. So the most obvious one is cameras. You may not think about it that way, but there's a whole area called driver monitoring systems where the camera is watching people to see whether they're alert or awake. And it just looks at the eyes to say whether the eyes are open or closed. It's a very simple construct, but that is not inclusive, because there could be a different construct of thinking about what is eyes open or closed. So that is what we did. So what we started thinking about is, okay, look at the camera data is looking at faces, because that's what it is looking for. And so facial recognition work has done by so many other people ahead of us. So we thought, we are not really adding anything, because if you're just saying, here's facial recognition system, they're biased, it's the same thing that they're going to be using inside the vehicle. We're not really adding value. So this is what I said. When you start off with research, you would have a hypothesis. You would think of some data set from where you will go prove this hypothesis with some experiment. And then you have to get to a place where you'll get the results to just, prove or disprove your hypothesis. But then you will find so much more juicy insight that will lead you to come up with something that's worth sharing with the world. And do it in such a way that when it is peer reviewed by others, they might say, oh, this is not acceptable, this is not scientifically solid. There is no ifs or buts, because you're passionate, you know the content, you can explain that, and you can present it well, so that your paper is accepted. So thank you, Ida. So processing image recognition. So that's what we were looking at in the car. So when I'm thinking about data in the car, one of the things we thought was simple facial recognition. So we said, okay, what are the standard data sets out there that is looking at images? And we went through that exercise. There is a whole data set search from Google. You can search by any keyword and you can find any kind of data sets out there. Let me find data set search. It's okay. I'm going to show that to you. So here is data set search. I can say car, and it will find car data, sample of car data, autonomous vehicle ownership data. There's a whole used car data. There could be many data, but this is not actually the kind of data that I wanted. So I want to find facial recognition, right? Facial recognition data. And then it will give me a whole bunch of information and data, or there is facial recognition data set. So going to Kaggle might be the easiest thing. Most people do that, but I like to go and look for open data sets that's out there. So, if I do the data set search on research.google.com, it gives me a lot more. And the good news is there are some known data sets that people use, that is commonly used by other researchers in the similar topic. So we found there were 4 such data sets. And then, since my focus here is to make it inclusive, I didn't want to pick any random data set and then run with it. So we wanted to see whether it was inclusive in the first place. And we found that they were not inclusive. So let me share that. So that became our starting point. It's beautiful because, we start off in one place and then it kind of leads us to other things. Okay, so I'm sharing my screen back. And we're at 45 and we are booting up, having a conversation now. So that's why I called it Research 101, because I can't do justice to it. And there are brilliant researchers who have a lot more experience than me. So that's why we're going to bring researchers for IoT Day. You're going to learn from them. But I wanted to share this dipping your toe, getting started as somebody in the tech industry. You could do this with no code. You could be a person who is not, working with any kind of technology, but you look at it as a user, you have passion for it, that's okay. So one of the first papers we did was to look at, I'm going to skip through this into a different sequence. Here is the 4 different data sets that are used, that are common in this space. And what we ended up doing is we looked at them and we found that there was this thing called Fairface, where they had taken existing data sets, augmented it with more data, and try to make it more fair. That's why it's called Fairface. So if you just Google for Fairface, you will find the GitHub for this paper. You will find a public data set called Fairface that anybody can use. And it has a lot of information about the breakdown of this data. And we didn't have to do any code or anything to do that. That was a great starting point. So we said, okay, this makes sense. Let's get started. And we played with this and we said, okay, is this open and inclusive of all genders? Is it open and inclusive of various cultures? And I think it has 7 different cultural breakdown. And so we thought this was relatively okay. And they themselves had run the standard, well-known, famous face recognition APIs and showed on their data set how biased it was. When they say it is biased or not biased, they're actually going to run this data set and they're going to show what is the performance of those APIs. So what we did is we said, we are going to take this data set, let's run that ourselves. And so we did that. In this case, they already did that. We could have just used that. But our goal was, remember, we were looking at AI, identifying people inside the vehicle. So what we wanted to do was, we said, okay, it is giving a data set which is saying, is this person of these race, and they have like 7 different race, and they had men and women as 2 genders. And so that was not enough. And if you've taken the inclusive AI course with Susanna Raj, And her research and work is about how you define inclusive construct, because you're telling the AI, you're telling the brains of the computer to think about a certain topic, in this case, how to identify a face. And there are so many different dimensions of looking at it. So yes, we were thinking about gender and race, but the concept of construct is, we wanted to the car was looking, or the AI inside the car was looking at data from the camera and was trying to identify whether a person is awake or alert. So it all goes back to what is alert. So we needed a construct for alert. It was very amusing because we found most of it out there was just looking whether the eye was open or closed. And again, different faces based on different cultures and race and lighting and hairdo. Obviously, there's variations of it. But we added one more. Our hypothesis was people could be crying, or people could be laughing, um, or they could be sneezing, and their eyes could be momentarily closed, or it might appear to be closed. So we added data. When I say data, we are just taking photos of faces demonstrating this crying, sneezing, laughing kind of situations. And we augmented the data to the fair face, and we said, okay, now this is our starting point. Now let's do what they already did with the existing face APIs, and is it recognizing this? And our hypothesis is that it would not, right? So we were just trying to prove that, and we did. But interesting during that process was, once we run it and we get the data, we were able to find that it is not just the face that was sneezing and it looked like it was sneezing, or the crying, and there was a cultural sensitivity of how guys would try not to cry, or women will close their face partially to not look like they're crying, and the algorithm was confused in recognizing them. But we found that when somebody has a beard, a guy wearing a beard, um, if it is like somebody you would see normally at work, which is relatively well groomed beard, then Amazon API recognizes it. But if that person is just growing a beard and is unkempt, it did not recognize them as a person. And so when we're thinking about inclusive, we are just thinking, oh, is it the race or gender, something like that. So that gave us a lot of data to write about. That gave us information right from the results to write about this on our analysis of what is inclusive, expand our construct. So what we thought as a hypothesis, we could go back and revise our hypothesis a bit more, and then run, and we could produce results. So that was one of our paper. And then, as I said, once you get started, you're not just going to do one and sit. Now AI in the vehicle. And I thought I will do this with the camera data, then we'll expand to voice in the car, we'll expand to a lot of other AI in the car. But then we realized even with camera data, we could expand to a lot more. So we said, okay, it is looking at driver alertness and with the eyes open or closed. And then we found that if there was a data set which was looking at the driver drinking water, being on the phone and called that distraction, and said, oh, the driver is not alert. We said, aha, now we can expand the construct to not just being on the phone, which is a very obvious distraction. We said, okay, that is where you saw the picture. That is actually a picture of me. Let me show that. Back to sharing, guys. Sharing the whole screen here. Okay, I'm just going to go through this same way here. So here we found that this is literally me. And I said, what if somebody is wearing a scarf and it's flying? Or if they're wearing a headscarf and it doesn't recognize them. So we created the next paper, which was based on movement, and we got a data set that actually covered the movement. And there was a public data set that was published with various different spatial annotations of eyes, body, face, and all that. So there's a huge area called driver management system. If any of my students who are into that space are interested, we use this Tato, and it came with tools, and then we did our experiments. So I'm not going to harp just on that experiment. Okay. Going back, we were looking at making AI inclusive. And then here is, how you can challenge the ethics of AI. And we have spoken about emotions AI. And today, emotions AI, the way you see that in many of the tech products, is done without strong scientific basis, from which has obviously been done in the social sciences world. And the beginning of that was the circles versus scale. uh, this is a paper from Susanna Raj and her colleagues, and they were looking at emotions of, identifying emotions. And this is like a whole field out there. So I want to pause for a minute. So we spoke about, why you should do AI ethics, how you can do it, and how people in tech industry who are doing various different job roles are coming in and doing that. This is a huge area. We won't do justice to it in 1 hour, but I wanted to have a small chat with you about how we can make AI inclusive from a research perspective. So I'll park that because we are at 5 minutes before the hour. So the how of the research would be, as I was talking to the different papers, I was telling you that, but I wanted to bring it back home, saying you would identify a problem, you would develop a hypothesis. A hypothesis is this is right. If this is like I said, it doesn't recognize spaces equally for for different kind of movements or different kind of races. And I would make a hypothesis and I would prove that. And then I just gave you a tiny glimpse of data sets, how you identify the data set. When you get a data set, how do you run an analysis of it, how you'll set up the experiments. It's a whole different world. So this is the ADAS thing I told you about. So before I'm going to get out of the share. So if you were here at Weekly Wednesday, we had Aisha Tugoda, not Aisha Tugoda, we had Tejumade Afunja come and talk to us. Aisha also talked to us about Hausa language, but Tejumade Afunja talked to us about deep learning models that she had done, and got started as a deep learning AI researcher because she found that AI is not inclusive of people from Africa, did not recognize them well, did not recognize their voices, and she wanted support for all kinds of voice and accents and language translation. That kind of motivated her to go into research in that area. But when she came and talked to us, so Weekly Wednesdays are Wednesday gathering with a speaker series that we have here this time every week, and we had this discussion about if AI is not inclusive. And she said, oh, it's using data sets that every company is using, the same set of data sets that I was telling you about. Then why can't we just make the data sets more inclusive? Like in my experiment, I was just augmenting more data and running with it. And we had a discussion, and she said, by attempting to infuse more data into a public data set, we would bring in our own bias. So when I may not bring all kinds of faces, I might introduce some dimension of bias that the next person can see. So just cleaning up the data sets in the world is not an exercise that's going to suddenly make it inclusive. So the approach that the scientific community, the AI research world accepts is, look at problems you want to solve, look at the data set. In the data set falls short and it's biased, then you augment it with more data to solve a specific problem. In this case, she took on the language models from Africa and ended up, and focused on voice, and then started adding, her own research papers and more towards that. So that way, when you get that research paper, you can actually go solve for that problem. So my motivation to talk to you all here is obviously, to tell you, hey, I am doing this, and research is approachable. It is not limited to just academia. And many of you who are working in industry have that knowledge of your domain space. You might come from a certain country and you have domain knowledge. In fact, one of the things I did recently was try to learn Spanish from Duolingo. And I found that there are various flavors of Spanish, and each of it comes from the culture of different regions. So when I'm here in California and I want to talk to my friend from Mexico, and it is Spanish, it is different from when I go to Barcelona and I'm talking to somebody who is from Spain. And there's a different version from Latin America in different countries. And it goes back to the culture of nuances of the language. And when we do translation, and if it is done just from somebody sitting here in Silicon Valley, that lived truth experiments is lost. So there's an opportunity to do cross collaboration around the world I was talking about. So that is one I hope that, and we will think about what local problems we can solve. So you bring your business acumen, you bring your local knowledge, you bring a topic that you're passionate about, see what somebody is doing in research space. Is that something you can contribute? You cannot contribute and sit quietly and somebody else is going to try to solve the problem, or leave this behind and build AI that is not inclusive. So, and it doesn't have to be that big noble call of changing the world. It could be, hey, I want to enhance my career. Is this going to help me? Can I get a grant, or can I get published? Is it going to help my career? So that's how I'm thinking, that whatever your approach, I think there is a calling here that you should get involved in research. So how do you take it from here? Let me see. Yes. Okay. Thank you guys for the comment. Yes. Pat is saying, I'm interested in the data inclusive class with Susanna. So I believe we have the recording of the class. Pat, I'm happy to follow up. So thank you, Ida. So the next step, what we are doing is we have IoT Day. I'm going to show that and then I'm going to wrap up, guys. On April 9th is IoT Day, as I mentioned, and AI research is our theme. So IoT Day is not something that I invented. IoT Day is done by IoT Council in the world with lots of events. This is our event where this is what we did with 22 women last year, and we are going to do that with 24 amazing women on the topic of AI research, who are going to come and talk to us. And so you can register here, and that would take you to this place. So I'll be sharing this. I'm sure I've shared this already in my newsletter, how to go sign up to be part of this. So when I say 24 hours, you don't need to be involved in 24 hours. We will be streaming live AI readout, AI topics from various different researchers. It's a complete women-led event, but open to everybody. And you can come in and watch the recording later, or watch the one that is streaming in your time zone. Round the clock at 9 o'clock in your time zone, there will be one session or more sessions. Round the clock, all the way from Melbourne, 9 a.m., which is California, previous day, April 8th, 3 o'clock, and all through the night. And then morning, my time, like this from 10 o'clock. This is 10 o'clock now when we're wrapping up. 10 o'clock to 5 o'clock, Roxy Simpson and I would be bringing 10 women, including us, to have a conversation and drive some discussion on various aspects of AI research. So there is one session on AI Research 101. This one, obviously, we'll put it out we'll share the recording, but the how to do the research, how to come up with a hypothesis, how to find the data set, how to build out the experiments, how to publish that. We have a detailed session, and Yash is going to be doing one on identifying a data set and seeing whether it is inclusive, how to go about it. So we're going to have a little bit of tactical sessions too. So there's a lot of educational stuff. So that'll be interesting. So if you want to dip your toe into AI research or just draw inspiration from the different researchers, it's such a global mix of 24 women. So hope you'll be able to join us. I want to show you I shared this on LinkedIn, but I wanted to show you this from Roxy Stimson before I wrap up for today, because you will see what I'm talking about, why I'm so excited.
This is our 4th year. On the IoT Day, April 9th, 2022, Sudha Jamthe and I will host another marathon featuring IoT women from all around the world. This year's theme is AI research. We are excited to have the support from Susanna Raj again. Welcome back.
Thank you, Susan.
And Yasha Vishwanath. We will likely live stream 24 hours, 24 women-led sessions, an IoT Day women event from 3 p.m. April 8th to 3 p.m. April 9th in Silicon Valley, USA, Pacific Daylight Time. Join us to learn about IoT, data, AI, chatbots, and more from IoT women from all around the world. My name is Roxy Stimson, currently a Vice President of Engineering at F5 and former Chief Technology Officer at IoT World Labs. Sudha Jamthe is a professor at Stanford and a globally recognized technology futurist on IoT, AI, and AV business. See everyone again soon. Register today on the Business School of AI Thank you.
Okay. So I've shared this on LinkedIn, but also you can just go to businessschoolofai.com and you'll find the link, and we'll be, and you can just go and register. If you register, you're going to get the Zoom link so that you can participate in the live session, and rest of it, you will get the schedule on when the streaming is happening, and you can come watch it. Or if you're registered, you can come back and get access to all the recording. So that's how we are trying to manage this. The only ask is we want you to be respectful and engage and help drive the conversation so we can all learn from this exercise. And hopefully as a follow-up to this, we will go build some poster sessions and go build out some research collaboratively, around the globe. So I'm so excited about that. So with that, I'm going to wrap up. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming today. And thank you for engaging on the chat. I appreciate that. And I look forward to seeing you on IoT Day. And it's April 9th, but our April 8th here in Silicon Valley, because we are, the time zone closer to the last time zone in the world. I'll see you online. And if I miss you on IoT Day, I will see you back at Weekly Wednesday, and Yash will be back hosting with her usual energy here. So with that, I'm going to wrap up. Thank you, everybody, and stay safe. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.